cheer for Eddie. I'm going to take a picture of all of you. Here we go. Welcome to Eddie's Memorial. Good afternoon, family, friends. On behalf of the Ranahan clan, thank you for being here today to celebrate the life of my grandfather, Edward Anthony Ranahan, or most of you knew him as Fast Eddie. Seeing so many of you gathered here today, from near and far, it's a testament to the kind of impact he had on so many lives. Your presence means the world to us, and I know it would mean the world to him. A memorial like this isn't just about remembering. It's about honoring the laughter, the kindness, the love that touched each of our lives in very different ways. Today we come together as family, friends, I see some neighbors. Today we're here to remember and share those memories and celebrate the extraordinary life of a man who made every room brighter. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Danny Dowling. Eddie was my grandpa. Growing up, Eddie and Eileen would sunbird out of Arizona and come up to the mild Chicago summers to spend time with our family for a couple months. As kids, we got to see a quieter side of Eddie. The slow mornings, the deep conversations over eggs, toast, and his morning tea, and a couple teas. We called that version of Edward Ranahan Sudoku Eddie. He'd sit at the table for hours, laser focused, always sharp as a tack, peppering Eileen and my mother with questions he was struggling with to answer with a crossword. He was the first one to show me how to swing a golf club. He was also my first driving instructor. Long before I had a driver's license. That was Burner Street. I think Devin's going to talk more about that in a minute. I'd follow him around the house, the garden, the garage while we tinkered, which usually meant just moving all my dad's tools around so we'd never find him. Even at 101 years old, his memory never wavered. He remembered everything and everyone, all the details, all the joy, all the fond memories stored inside the vault of his mind that he had to his very last breath. Fast Eddie was a man of deep faith, faith in God, faith in his family, faith in his country. He possessed a level of generosity I have rarely seen matched in my time on this earth. With his time, his talents, and his treasure, he gave freely without hesitation. When life got hard, his smile and his calm, happy-go-lucky nature would always remind me everything was going to be okay. You're doing great, Danny, he'd say. I'm proud of you. He lived through some pretty extraordinary times in history. War, hardship, prosperity. He never lost a sense of gratitude or wonder. He never lost his cowboy heart and spirit either. As a kid, I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. My grandpa was an actual cowboy. Or at least that's how my young mind saw his John Wayne Granger. There's no doubt he helped spark my love for the West and adventure. Sorry, Mom. It's your dad's mom. For the wide open spaces. He had that effect on most people he met, though. His passion and enthusiasm was infectious, and he left you wondering how one human could possess so much joy. What I remember most, though, is his smile. That feeling of being the one person in the room when he looked at you and when you were carrying on a conversation. He made you feel like the center of the universe. For the last 25 years, at nearly every family gathering, he'd pull me close, slip a 20 in my pocket, and he'd say, "Hey, take that girl out somewhere nice." He'd give me a big hug goodbye, and he'd say, "This is probably the last time I'm going to see you, kid. I love you. Take care of yourself." That was 25 years of this. So in a way, it feels like I've been saying goodbye to Eddie for most of my adult life. While death leaves a heartache no one else can heal, love leaves a memory no one can steal. And again, I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate the life and times of one of the greatest men I've had the pleasure to know, Edward Anthony Ranahan. I feel like I speak for most of the room when I say thank you, Eddie, for the memories, the lessons, the laughter, the love, and the friendship. You were one of a kind, and will carry you with us always. Let's all raise a glass to Fast Eddie. Sláinte. Now I'm going to pass it off to Mary Ranahan. It's live mic, careful.
Hello, family. I was trying to figure out what to say about Dad. And there's so much material. It took a few days to write, but here's my stab at Eddie. This is Ode to Eddie. My father had the amazing ability to develop, grow, and continue to become a better version of himself. He continued to replicate his joy and shared all that he knew with everyone. When writing this, I realized a number of stories that I have for Eddie are so expansive. What a great life this man had. I picked a few fun stories that you may not have heard before, and a small snapshot of this man's long and joyful life. Here's my ode to Eddie, the 3 stages of Eddie. So there was early Eddie. I know from my recollections, being the caboose, as he used to call me. I probably don't remember a lot of them, but the ones that he told me, and we call that, 'tis himself told me. Last summer, I asked him a few questions about his life, what were the happiest times when he was growing up. He would take off in the Forest Preserve in Chicago and camp overnight. He loved that his mother would just let him go and explore. The Forest Preserve also had horse stables where he told me he learned to ride. As a young man, he had a friend named Jack Cullerton with a cottage in Lake Michigan. The boys would all go up on Friday after school, but Eddie couldn't because he worked. So he would hitchhike up to Michigan on Saturday morning. And he'd bring his younger brother John with him. Casey was just a little too young for all the shenanigans. This was where he met the raven-haired Eileen. She was visiting a friend at a neighboring cottage on the lake. And while in service, he wrote to his mom, sending her money to buy a new dress for Mother's Day, always asking how his sister Mary was and wishing them all well, and counting the days until he got home to be with family. He married Eileen when he returned with a big dream to build a house in the suburbs. They all thought he was crazy. He built it on the old baseball field with no trees and planted way too many. It must have seemed like a world away, but they took the leap. As a young father, he was working 9 to 5, taking the train downtown every day. After work, he and his buddies at Illinois Bell would sometimes go out for beers. And they were kind of dreamers. They were engineers, but they were also big dreamers. And they talked about what it was going to look like at Illinois Bell in several years. The television, he said that they decided, after a few years, that the television would have a phone on the side of the console. And you would be able to pick it up and see the person on your TV. And he said, I could have made $1 million. And so, that was 40 years, so they were way ahead of their time. I remember when I lived at home multiple times, he would leave for work in one car and return home in a different car. All unbeknownst to Eileen. He wore her out with all the money shuffling, I'm sure. We all know his love for dogs. How he brought a dog back from the war, and when he visited our houses, we couldn't stop him from feeding our animals from the table. When I was younger, my cousins would visit, and when we were making sandwiches, they would open up the meat drawer and see the liver sausage, and they asked if they could eat some, and I said, well, sure, but that's the dog's treat. So we'd all have a good laugh about that. And then Eddie's second ode is retired Eddie. They made so many wonderful memories in Winfield, and many of their friends moved down to Arizona, and that was their little nest way out west. And they made more and more friends in Arizona. The door was always open. Anybody that was there knows that it was revolving all the time. You could come in for a chat, a snack, some tea, coffee that would progress to beer. And they sure had visiting down to a science, right? The pool and the hot tub time, that was the daily event. After his nap, he would go bob in the pool in the afternoon, and at about 4 p.m., we would wait for the big British Airways plane to come in. And that was the sign that we needed to get out of the pool and go home and make dinner. He once told me with a big grin and a twinkle in his eye, I wasn't built for work. And I thought, well, neither am I. Anyway, he said I'm much better in retirement and I'm much happier. And in the summers, he made the trip back to Chicago with some stops in Seattle. Our grandkids, his grandkids, were so lucky to have shared him for weeks on end and have them be part of their lives. He said the 4th was his favorite holiday, and he loved to celebrate his birthday with a big family party. He also loved a good project. Whether you already had a plan and didn't need his help, he always came up with a different plan. And we know that we always saved at our house the big projects for when Eddie arrived, because he was so happy he'd get his jeans on and get to work sketching out the plan after a couple beers at the table. Then my third ode to Eddie was not something I expected, but it was Eddie without Eileen. Danny's allowed. He got two. I get at least 2. As he learned to live on his own in Arizona, I asked him to wear the emergency alert button. He promptly tied it to the light by his bed and never wore it. We got him a scooter chair so he could zip around, always reminding him to turn down the speed. Nobody knows on a scooter chair you have a turtle and you have rabbit, and he was constantly on rabbit. And he liked the rabbit option better, and he liked driving fast. When he got his smartphone, he began texting at the age of 95. I was showing him how apps worked and how things could be downloaded. We downloaded him a Bitmoji on his phone, which for those of you who don't know, it's like an avatar. And you build it. You know, you put your shirt on, you put your pants on, you put your glasses on, you choose your hairstyle. And about a week later, he sent me a text, and it was different Bitmoji. And I called him and I said, what did you do to your Bitmoji? And he said, oh, I didn't like my hair and I got new glasses. I made some magnets of some of my favorite Bitmojis from Eddie, and they're up front, so grab one for your fridge and get a wink out of Eddie. My friends would always ask Eddie, what's the key to your long life? And he would say, happiness. I love life and I love people. He never met a stranger because they all became friends. When I would pick him up at the airport, he always had 1 or 2 people in baggage claim that would come up to me and said, oh my God, I sat next to your father on the plane. And I would smile at them and say, yeah, I know, he's quite something, isn't he? A few months ago, I came into his bedroom and he had his eyes closed and he said with his boyish smile, and then his eyes opened, he said, you want to play money? He's Mickey. Knows you well, right? he opened his eyes and winked at me. It was his way of saying, let's talk investing and how can we peel together another $50K to buy a CD. He wasn't very rich, but he loved the whole investment stream. And so he was constantly talking about that. I see signs of him daily, our fella in yellow. And last week I had a flower bloom in my garden. There's my second Danny. That had never bloomed before. It was its first time, and it was a yellow flower. I have pictures of him that pop up on my phone daily. He's always sending love. On one of my visits last year, as I struggled with the reality of losing Dad, he said, I will always be here and never gone.
Well, I've written Eddie Ranahan, a man with a plan. My dad grew up in the Depression, the child of two hardworking immigrants, one of 4 children. They only had 3 first cousins in this country. And we, who have many cousins, can hardly imagine that. He had a talent for making long-lasting friends from the time he was a young little boy. And that continued throughout his life. He grew up loving the city parks and forest preserves, as Mary said. He received when he graduated from 8th grade, they gave him a half scholarship to St. Ignatius, and he didn't have the money for the other half, and his siblings were all still in Catholic school. St. Rita offered him a full scholarship. So he took the St. Rita scholarship, and the lucky guy, his father worked for the CTA, and he could take the free CTA from 2400 South to 63rd to go to high school. In June of 1943, he graduated and was called up for World War II in July. He trained in Mississippi, New Jersey, and was assigned to the Signal Corps, Army Air Corps, before the Air Force. He trained in communications. He landed day 135 in Normandy, following the infantry from France to Belgium to Holland to Germany. When the war ended in Europe, he was able to travel to Ireland. Ireland was neutral, and they were waiting for transport to go to Japan to fight the Japanese. And he knew they wouldn't have a boat for him for quite a while. So he went to Ireland, he met his cousins, the Ranahans and the Kings, and he kept contact with them all his life. He visited them for the rest of his life. Now let me tell you about his plans. The Army Air Corps asked him to stay in Europe, in the European theater after the war. And he said, they offered him a sergeant position. He said, no, I want to go home. So plan one, he's returned home. He was going to get a job, brought his dog. He married Eileen. Grandma Jewel had connections. She always had connections. And she got him an interview with AT&T, with his communication background. He was very proud of his many years with AT&T, working downtown and then in Oak Brook. He was proud of being an AT&T pioneer. Plan 2, save money. For the next dream, he and Eileen visited friends in Winfield and put down money on a big open field next door. He designed his home. He had it built by the locals, and the locals told him to scale it down because you don't have the money for this. He did the electricity, and his brothers John and Coleman helped with the plumbing. We have telephone jacks everywhere in our house. He became very active in his community. He coached basketball at the Catholic school for nights and weekends in the 60s. He was the Winfield Public School board member in the 70s. He worked 2 jobs when his family needed extras. He worked at the Franciscan Mother House, which is now Mary and Joy, and he worked that from 9 to 12. And then he worked in Oak Brook at AT&T from 3 to midnight. And all the time collecting many friends along the way. Plan 3, retirement. He decided to check out Florida, then he checked out Arizona, where he had friends in both places that had already retired, and he decided on Arizona. He bought a townhome, and it was like a quad townhome. There were 4 of them in one building, so he bought one. Then he bought the one next door, and he would go off every day and rehab it, and then he would sell it, and then he bought the 3rd one and did the same thing, made a little money each time, and then he decided that he had a friend that lived in a mobile park, and he thought that would be really nice. It was a senior mobile park, and he and Eileen lived there happily for many years, returning summers and visiting, like we said, Seattle, Pennsylvania, Oak Park, Hinsdale, Winfield. His final plan. After 7 years after Eileen died, he was forced to return here because of COVID. We really couldn't deal with him being sick out there. He wanted to return to the house he built. And he had already arranged years ago for us to buy it so it would be available. So he returned to his house that he built. He worked every day in the yard. You know, we had him 4 years. He worked all the time in the yard. He loved his yard. He made it a park. He made it a forest preserve, just like he loved when he was a child. And then he planned it well, and he wanted to die in the house he built. And he did it. He was always a man with a plan.
Your son.
Oh, my son, okay.
It is hard up here. Well, thank you everyone for coming out. I know this has been a long time in the making. Thank you for helping us celebrate.
Come on, you got this.
I get 3
Three.
For Grandma Eddie, you know, I just think it's amazing that, you know, my mother and her sisters had their father for as long as they did. It's amazing to think and hope for others to be able to do the same thing. So, how do you begin to sum up a life that has spanned more than a century? A life that witnessed what has changed in the world that only most of us can read or dream about. I often think about what he witnessed in his lifetime, how many babies he held, how many first communions, weddings he danced at in his lifetime. The stories that one man's life can hold. But with the blessing of living a long life comes the sadness. To see one's parents pass, siblings, your beloved wife, and your children. Longevity is a beauty, but also a curse. But more impressive than the history he witnessed was the history made within his family. He was the root, strong root of a growing tree. A father, an uncle, a grandfather, a great-grandfather. His presence extended far and wide, across generations, across family branches, and across time. Despite the years, we stayed constant to his wisdom, his strength, and his love for all of us. My grandfather was not just old, he was timeless. He carried with him values that never went out of style: hard work, honesty, humility, a deep love for his family and his faith. He never needed, well, at least when I was young, he never needed to raise his voice. I'm told he did a lot more when he was younger. The grandkids never really saw that. We saw the softer side of him. I know that one of my gifts that I'll never forget and take with me everywhere is his ever loud and aggressive sneezes. How I took that, but I had a fast, steady sneeze, and it's constant. So my brothers always remind me of that. Today we gather to share not only our happy memories, but we're celebrating in the way that he would have wanted us to. Smiling, laughing, hugging. So I'm going to lead with a verse from a song that I like called Pink Skies. If you could see him now, you'd be proud, but you'd think these youngins. Your funeral is beautiful. I bet God heard you coming.
Can I get another Jameson? Thank you all for being here today. I know Eddie would love to plant one of his famous whispery kisses on everyone here. Mary Pat and Mickey spoke on Eddie's life and the father he was, and I would like to add to Dan and Pat's words and tell you some stories and regale you with the life as a grandchild of Eddie Ranahan. My brothers, cousins, and I all had a unique opportunity to have a part-time live-in grandparents, or as my dad would say, he didn't read the fine print on his marriage license. Specifically the part where they would move in the summer. Living in Arizona every year, the snowbirds would come back to Chicago, Seattle, and for a short time Pennsylvania around Memorial Day, and then head back the second the leaves thought about falling. Growing up, I could always tell when Eddie and Eileen were in town. We would come home from school or later in the summer Broadway warehouse and hear Eileen singing to the doves. And at the same time, my dad would be staring bewildered at a DIY sprinkler system that Eddie had built up like for 2 hours. As my brother Dan highlighted, Eddie was the first of, Eddie was the first of many underage driving instructor. I believe Dennis was the last one to have Eddie toss him the keys to the White Dodge Dynasty and let him drive up and down Bruner Street or the St. John's parking lot. I guess that's why Eileen did most of the driving in their later years, to keep an eye on the keys. I'm sure Eddie would be happy to know, although I regret I never told him, that in the Dowling house that tradition lived on. From my brother Dan throwing me the keys to the red minivan to cruise down some side streets, to me throwing the keys to Dylan in the parking lot of Broadway Warehouse. What Mama don't know can't hurt her. Or at least now she can't ground us. However, all of our cousins were able to terrorize the roads of Publius Arena in the golf cart that he picked up somehow. Eddie was everything you want in a grandparent. He was there to support you, help you push the limits of your parents' rules, and he's held a genuine interest in every facet of your life and what the future would hold. After the birth of both Logan and Jack, the next call we would have to make after my parents was to Eddie. As we learned, he couldn't sleep knowing that until he knew everything was well. Then I was let in on the secret that Eddie couldn't rest during the birth of any of his grandchildren or his great-grandbabies. He was also always a good sport. I recall to mine and Dylan's horror of the time that we went to Rawhide and my mom spent a couple bucks to have Eddie hung. Best couple bucks she ever spent. Also, he was patient, as he reordered milkshakes at Portillo's because I was big enough to hold the tray just to dump them on the floor. Eddie was quick to slip you a 20. He was even quicker still to slip any pup sitting at the table half an egg roll. I recall our butterball of a dog, Max, in his later years, would only run or get puppy level excited as when he saw Eddie cross the threshold. I imagine a stampede of dogs met him at the pearly gates and probably expedited the entrance. He continued to slip me money until the day I had to inform him I was 30 years old and I made more money than his Social Security and pension. Although I still had to slip the waitress my credit card anytime I tried to buy me dinner. I had the rare opportunity 3 times in my life to take time off between jobs and starting a new one. Unfortunately for me, I chose early January in Chicago to make such a transition. Fortunately for me, I knew a guy with time on his hands, 70-degree weather, and a spare bedroom. It was a great opportunity for me to hang out with my one remaining grandparent as an adult. January in Arizona is also a great time to rent a car. All the snowbirds and locals don't see 70 degrees as convertible weather. So I was able to upgrade my rental to a Mustang convertible for about $3 a day more. It was wonderful to pull the top down as I'm still pulling ice out of my beard. It also shed a light on how wonderful of a Pueblo Serena family Eddie had. As soon as folks would see a brand new Mustang in the drive, they would stop by to see who was trying to swindle Eddie's AT&T pension away from him. Visiting him in the winter months, we would live the retirement dream. We'd have an early breakfast, a swim, and a hot tub. One afternoon, we went to the casino where we won $55.97 for our efforts. I won't tell you how much money we started with. We had a great evening out on the town in Tempe, where we stopped by my Uncle Keith's favorite Arizona bar, Rula Bula, for some fresh surfing turf. A couple 2-tree Guinness and a whiskey flight later, we flipped a coin for who drove home. A few years later, and a new job later, I pulled in with another brand new Mustang. He goes, "Nice car, let's take it to Tucson tomorrow." I think I was the only one who thought he was kidding, because the next morning we drove to Tucson. He wanted to see St. Xavier de Bach Mission, also known as the White Dove of the Desert. It's a beautiful Spanish-style Franciscan church that they finished in the late 1700s and started in the 1600s. It's a shocking white church that seems to pop out of the desert. He explained it was a church that Eileen had insisted on stopping on whenever they were on their way to or from the mission work they did at the border. It was a 2-hour one-way drive he insisted on taking to remember and talk about their mission trips. More importantly to him, how beautiful my grandmother found the church and the times they had spent there together. A tank of gas and a 20 in the donation jar well spent. It highlighted to me the devotion to community service, charity, and good Catholic works that Eddie and Eileen committed themselves to, for no other reason than it was the right thing to do. Their devotion to their church community extended far beyond sitting with the band and singing loudly every Sunday. I will never forget those winter trips to Arizona and the time I had with Eddie as an adult. It was once remarked, and an accurate portrayal of Eddie, as, quote, "For a guy who at times barely has a pot to piss in, he is the richest man in the world. He is rich in family, rich in friends, rich in community, and rich in a kind and generous heart." A few years back, Logan and I had a chance to play hooky with Mickey and Eddie and explore the tank park here at Cantigny. Mickey took Logan for a walk in the gardens for a nap, and Eddie and I explored the Big Red One Museum. Specifically the side that highlighted World War I and World War II. For those of you who have not been, it is quite an interactive experience where you walk through World War I trenches and you get to storm the beaches of Normandy. Safe to say, it was not wheelchair accessible. So as I manhandled Eddie in his wheelchair through this, we would stop and review the maps in the different areas of the world. He told me about how his dad was in the artillery with the Big Red One, from the Battle of Cantigny to St. Michel to the Argonne. Eddie lamented how weird it was to be traveling through Europe in the same towns his father had been just years before, and what a waste of humanity was his final line on the subject. Sorry, Jesus, always spicy. The last time Eddie was out and about before Thanksgiving, we'd all met up at Dennis and Christine's new house. It was a lovely evening of pizza and karaoke, and we worked our way through the Frozen and Moana soundtracks. We also got our last rendition of When Irish Eyes Are Smiling and a few more Irish songs with Eddie. Unfortunately, that pre-Thanksgiving outing was the last outing. Following that, Eddie never left the home he had built in Winfield. His spirit was willing, but his body was hungry. I had the good fortune to be underemployed in the spring. He was on hospice. With my free time waiting for the construction season to start, I would frequent McDonald's for milkshakes for my trips to Liberty Street. For a man who had known he'd gotten his money's worth at owner 101, he was still involved with the things going on around him. He always wanted to know how work was, how family was, what's new, or did you see this in the news? He was also fascinated with the price of things till the very end. He was constantly in disbelief with the price of gas. And the new one that he had that he couldn't believe was the price per yard of concrete. It was far too much, he would say. I would never pay that. Like he was going to be pouring a deck the next week. The one that really made me laugh that Mary Pat had pointed to was he wanted to buy another investment CD. But he told Mary Pat to hold off because he didn't like the rates. What are you waiting for? My final interaction with Eddie was the night before he passed. I had been by earlier in the week, but I had a bid in Naperville that would bring me close enough to stop by. He was sleeping when I got there, but the first words out of his mouth when he woke up was, "How'd you do on your bid?" And it caught me by surprise. Here was a man who was not only knocking on heaven's door, but looking for his keys. And he wanted to know how business was going. I don't think I've ever met anyone more prepared to go, but firmly aware and rooted in the world around him. As he once said to Chris Carl, everyone's getting their ticket punched but me. I can't thank my Aunt Mickey enough for her constant hosting of everyone who needed their last dose of Eddie Ranahan. And also my Aunt Mary Pat and my mom for the time they spent with Eddie to make sure he knew he was loved as he went off to catch Eileen. As well as my Uncle Bob, my Uncle Keith, and my dad for the behind-the-scenes hospitality, time, and support. I also know he took great joy in many of you here who stopped in to call, FaceTime, and visit since final months. My hope is that he had a full report to give Eileen on the night he finally got his ticket punched. As the blood moon and the tornado ushered him home. So on behalf of the family, I would like to thank you all for being here today. I know he would have wanted this to be, sorry, I can't see the paper anymore. I know he wanted this memorial to be more of a party than one full event. So the bar is open. Let's try and rival the party that the AT&T pension department is having now that Eddie's off the payroll. I would like to cap it all off and say, Lord, we give you Eddie. Please send back his smile and his laugh as soon as possible. Cheers.
Okay. All right.
I think they're ready to move.